I went into the Odyssey completely blind. I've never read the original story. I knew basically nothing about Greek mythology going into this. And honestly, I had no idea what to expect. But this is Christopher Nolan taking on one of the greatest stories ever told. So the real question is, did the Odyssey actually live up to the hype? I don't think the pacing and the story could have been done better. Christopher Nolan really went all out, as he always does, and made this probably one of the craziest cinema experiences I've ever had, and I'm gonna get into why. As I said already, I had basically zero background knowledge about this story, Greek mythology wise and the Odyssey wise, but it was still an easy story to follow along to. Not that the movie was not complex, it was very much complex, but I don't think you actually need to know the original story to understand the Odyssey movie. The journey was structured basically following one person's journey, and then everything else flows around it, if that makes sense. Obviously, the person I'm talking about is Odysseus. The runtime is 2 hours and 50 something minutes, roughly almost 3 hours, which I think was a perfect amount of time for this movie to run for because of the amount of things that are in it. When you go watch it, if you haven't yet, or if you have already watched it, you understand why it was a perfect amount of time. I was invested through the whole movie. I remember very small points where I was a little bit disinterested, which is normal for almost every single movie. I don't think there's any movie without some sort of dead space, but I'd say 95% of this movie was probably keeping me on the edge of my seat. Nothing was poorly explained or confusing that I can remember, at least. Maybe there were some things where I had to go maybe do some research afterwards, mainly Greek mythology related, not really in terms of the actual story. But besides that, everything was pretty solid. The overall adventure, no exaggeration, is probably one of the greatest interpretations of adventure and exploring, with deep emotional points as well. It's not just action. There's action and then it's followed by emotions. Those two things combined create a very much polarizing movie, but in the best way possible. My favorite encounters and sequences throughout the entire thing, obviously when Odysseus and his crew run into the Cyclops. The part where the Cyclops starts screaming, if you haven't seen this movie, you have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm sorry for the spoiler. What a terrifying experience, especially watching it in IMAX, which I gladly was able to do. I also love when they go to the island, and I believe it's Circe who greets them and then turns the men into pigs. Amazing sequence. Obviously, when Odysseus reveals himself, what an insane sequence. I have to say that my favorite in the entire movie would have to be when the gates of Troy open up and then they flood Troy. That to me was perfection. I don't think that there's a lot of sequences in the history of movies that have made me feel the way that that sequence made me feel. I don't know how to explain it to you guys. I can maybe find a visual to put on the screen for you guys to understand what I'm talking about. Obviously, the Trojan horse part of the movie where they're all crammed in the Trojan horse. Insane. I think that this project, The Odyssey, was just a buildup of masterclass in writing, directing, acting, obviously. From what I know about Christopher Nolan films, they feel like independent films. At least that's what the actors say when they're filming on set. He kind of lets the actors be free as well. I'm not saying they improvise everything, but he allows them to make mistakes. He allows them to kind of add their own texture and style of acting, and you can see it a lot with Jon Bernthal, actually. You notice it because Jon Bernthal obviously has a set of acting skills that he repeats throughout different characters while not being redundant at the same time. So he's not playing the same character. It's not like The Rock. Jon Bernthal does it in a way where he grabs those elements that he does in most characters, and then he'll add them to the character he's playing while still adding a twist. And I think that that is a perfect result of Christopher Nolan kind of just letting him do what he wants. And I'm sure every actor on set felt the same way. You can feel it as a viewer. You feel the energy. You feel the quality of acting. The mythological elements were handled perfectly. The fact that it was mostly practical effects to me is still insane. Very minimal CGI on the Cyclops. It was a puppet. The giants that were in the giant metal suits were literally just angles and practical effects as well. The sculpting when she turns the men into pigs, that was also zero CGI, which again, insane. I can't stress it enough. I don't think that there's any director in our lifetime that has ever gone to these extents to do this. The whirlpool was caused by jet skis and boats making a small whirlpool for the CGI people to then create a whirlpool around the small one so that it looks even more realistic. This movie isn't your average movie. It's not what the people online are telling you. It's not the garbage or the go woke, go broke thing that people keep saying. The whole premise of that argument is stupid, in my opinion. This movie is a masterclass. It's not your average normal movie. This is one of the few movies where I personally say this movie is objectively a good movie. And I don't say that about a lot of movies because I know everyone has their own opinions. The Odyssey does not emit any type of mediocrity in any way, shape, or form. The scale and sense of adventure throughout the entire film was executed very well. You are constantly invested in every single character that's shown on screen. It's not even just the main characters. Even the smaller characters, every single point of this film is done in a way where you care. Every single mythological element was done very well, to the point where I went and I did my own research on Greek mythology after. That is a huge sign that the movie did the job it was meant to do, and that the director and the actors did the job they were meant to do. I was obviously surprised by the moment that I already explained, by the Cyclops screaming. That was the most terrifying and surprising sequence. I don't know how to explain it if you haven't experienced it, especially in IMAX. If you've heard it, you understand exactly what I'm trying to say. The cinematography was insane. Obviously, the entire film was filmed in IMAX lenses, which is the first movie ever to do that, meaning that there's a lot of things that they have to jump over for them to even be able to make this movie in the first place. That goes to show the amount of grit and effort that went into the making of this. I have my hat off to Christpher Nolan. I have to say that he might be the greatest director of all time. I don't think that there's anyone out there that does it like him. And when you have the actual actors saying this as well, then you know that there is some sense of truth to that. I live for this. I truly love cinema, and I'm very, very happy that filmmakers like Christopher Nolan still exist, because it's a refreshing feeling to go to the cinema and actually see something that is, obviously the Odyssey is an old story, but I'm saying the way he twisted it into his own style without caring about the backlash, to me is beautiful, and that's what art is about. And directing, acting is a form of art. The music was insane. I'm not even gonna get into the background and the making of the music, but if you want to know more about that, actually do your research. I don't know enough about the instruments that were used. All I know is they used old instruments that were used way back then. But all I'm gonna say is that there's certain parts, especially when they're flooding the gates of Troy and they're, you know, obviously committing mass murder and slaughtering people. The soundtrack that's playing is so hypnotic that I can't put it into words. I haven't heard something like that in a film or a project in a long time, or maybe ever, that I can't even think of right now. So that speaks for itself. You're locked in on Odysseus' story the whole time. You're invested in not only Odysseus, but also his son and his journey of wanting to go back home, and the depth of what that means to a man. The extents that he went just to see his wife and his son again. The promises he made. He has heavily been hit with a sense of guilt over the conquering or the murder of the city of Troy, and every consequence that follows, he feels like it's his fault, because he was obviously the general. He was the one who led and came up with the plan of the Trojan horse and broke Zeus's law, because Zeus's law is treat everyone how you would like to be treated, just in case they're a god. And the very action of the Trojan horse is completely breaking that in half and basically saying that Zeus's law means nothing. And that guilt is eating at him the whole movie. Especially, obviously, we know when he gets tied to the ship and then he wants to hear the sirens and he has this moment of guilt. And basically the philosophy behind it is you want what you can't get, and what you can't get is what you already had, or something like that. Please don't quote me on that. The depth of that scene alone to me was extremely impactful, because obviously what it means is insane. It speaks volumes, and it shows us exactly how Odysseus is feeling in that very moment. It's not just a surface level, oh, he's guilty. No, we really see what is going on with him mentally, how much he is in agony. When he keeps eating the flower that makes his memories go away, obviously he keeps eating it so that he doesn't have to remember everything that he did, and in turn not giving him as much pain and basically numbing his pain. But then he finally wants to face it. I think the character I connected to the most has to be Odysseus. Not that I've been through those events in my life ever. You know, the sense of guilt, I feel like we've all felt it at some point in our lives. It eats away at you. Zeus's law is obviously taking away the whole in case they're a god thing. That's not what I believe. Obviously, I don't believe in Greek mythology, but Zeus's law is treat others how you would like to be treated. And as cliche as that sounds, as soon as you corrupt that law, that unwritten rule in life, a lot of consequences follow. You become a hypocrite. We're shown that throughout this whole film. Robert Pattinson's character was one of the characters that stood out to me the most. Obviously, we know he's a use the spears, use the swords. Like, brother, why don't you get out there and use the spears and the swords, brother? What are we doing? How scared are you of Odysseus? If I was in his shoes, shit, I'd probably be in the same predicament. But all I'm saying is, when you have been talking that much shit about Odysseus. And then when he's right in front of you, you hide behind a pillar and you start screaming for other people to fight for you. There was no pacing issues, routine issues. Only thing that kind of threw me off a little bit, I'd have to say, is the American accents being used for the characters. It threw me off a little bit. Obviously, I'm used to, you know, movies that are set in this time. For some reason, you want to hear a British accent, but it doesn't matter because it would have been in Greek anyway. It took me a little bit to get used to it, but once maybe 25 minutes into the movie, I was okay with it. Something that confused me at first was I questioned why Odysseus hit the Cyclops with that last arrow in the eye, pissing it off. But then I thought about the scene and I understood that obviously the Cyclops was absolutely rage baiting Odysseus. He spit out one of his soldiers' helmets. So Odysseus was like, nah, that, I'm getting it back in blood, and he indeed did do that. But then obviously he pissed off Poseidon in return, and then consequences followed. Another trend or message in this movie is obviously actions require consequences, and that is shown throughout the whole thing. I'm very much someone who thinks a lot about how things are made, and I don't just look at the story for what it is, like, oh, it's just a movie. No, I see, oh, this is a beautiful work of art that required a lot of effort and work and months and maybe a year of filming. I don't know how long it took. People's blood, sweat, and tears, genuine physical labor was put into this movie. This is the type of film that you really have to think about that. That's at least what I was thinking when I left the theater. What a beautiful masterpiece. As someone who did not know the source material, did it work for me? Absolutely. If I were to rate this movie out of a 10, I would have to give it a solid, very, very solid, a 10 out of 10. It's not the type of movie I take lightly. This is truly a masterpiece and a perfect movie. I don't think I can explain it in any other way. It's been your boy Source. I love you guys. I do comic reviews, media reviews, movie reviews, TV show reviews, all of the above. God bless. Bye-bye.